So it's a 50-50 bet the whole thing will be ruled unconstitutional. When I say whole thing, I mean the country-specific tariffs, not the industry-specific tariffs. And the Supreme Court took it on an accelerated schedule, which means that by the end of 2025, it's possible that we will finally know the legality of the tariff program that Trump first announced his excitement about not long after riding down the golden escalator 10 years ago. And in a sane world and a coherent world, one would check out the legality of one's policies before upsetting global markets and international relations. But one has chosen not to do that.
Hi, I'm Fergus Macphee, and welcome to the Trump Report on Times Radio. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday, on our YouTube channel, and you can also listen and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me today, I'm delighted to say, is Justin Wolfers, Professor of Public Policy and Economics at the University of Michigan. Justin, it's only been a week since we last spoke. How are you?
I've missed you so much.
Us too, and our audience, I'm sure. Well, we normally start with tariffs when we speak, but actually we'll start on something slightly different, and that is inflation data in the US, because we're speaking after this morning, wholesale inflation unexpectedly declined. All the predictions were it would go up by around 0.3% after a rise of 0.7% in July, but it actually dipped by 0.1% for the first time since April. Are you surprised?
Everyone's a little surprised. Absolutely. I just want to start by saying I feel seen. For so long, we've only talked tariffs, and I thought you thought I was only a tariff guy, and I'm not even a tariff guy. I'm an economist. So I feel seen. I feel grateful. Maybe we can talk a little bit of demand and supply, maybe monopoly, oligopoly. We'll do all of it, Fergus. All right, I'll answer your question. You're exactly right to say Wall Street was expecting a much higher number for fairly obvious reasons. I think the two most obvious reasons are that tariffs are in the works, and the other is actually that the previous number was very high. And so if you thought there was momentum to inflation, which there often is, that would lead to a higher number. So how do you adjust your views of the world today based on this snippet of evidence relative to what it was yesterday? And this is the thing, we're always trying to triangulate based on everything we know. Well, a month ago, we were surprised that the exact same index was a little stronger than anticipated. So maybe we should just average the two out and say it wasn't too hot last month. It's not too cold this month. It's inflation just moving along. It's actually still really good news because inflation just moving along when you've added this inflationary bias due to tariffs is good news. But basically speaking, we've undone last month's bad news with this month's good news.
And I'm going to ask you something that I think you don't want to ask, because I think you tweeted last week saying, I think journos might now stop asking me why the hard data are so good given the economic news has been so grim. I guess I've got to ask you that same question today.
Yeah, have you asked me that one in the past? You probably have. Everyone does.
I don't know if I have, but...
Well, it's because you only ask about tariffs. Okay, let's go back. 2 or 3 months ago, well, so you could hear the US economy crack on April 2nd, Liberation Day. And then through May and June, a lot of journalists would call me and say, boy, you've said terrible things would happen. But the hard data, by which they mean things like non-farm payrolls, GDP, and so on, don't look so bad. Now, by the way, the first quarter's GDP number was negative, so I'm not sure I grant the premise. But even so, there is something there. The hard data, the economy hadn't turned south. And the soft data, which is attitudinal data, surveys asking people, do you think now's a good time to buy a major appliance? Do you expect unemployment to rise? Do you expect inflation to rise? Are you worried about your family's finances? Those were in the tank. And actually, it wasn't just consumers. It was also CEOs and business people. Everyone was miserable about the economy. So you had this disjunction between the two. Now, first of all, let me give you the answer I should have given you back then. I don't know if I did, which is that news cycles move faster than economic cycles. And so what happened was April and May, all we're doing is talking about economic chaos, but it takes a while to turn the Titanic of the American economy around. Not only that, It then takes another month or two for us to get the data. So no one should have been surprised at that point that soft data moved before hard data. But then actually the hard data kept being okay. And I started to have a few doubts. And then it turned out the BLS got more data, more companies responded to their payroll survey. And it turned out what had appeared to be a moderately good economy, an A minus, in fact was a moderately weak economy, a B minus. Given that the surveys were kind of a C, the difference between a B minus and a C doesn't feel so big. And so it turns out all along the real economy was moving very much as you would anticipate. It just took our measures a little while to see that.
So if you said that last month, I think you said last month wasn't great, this month is actually not as bad as planned or feared, what might you imagine we might see next month?
You're confounding two things. So I want to draw a sharp distinction. There's what we call the real economy, the real stuff that happens, which is how much do we make? How many people have jobs? What do we produce? That has been weakening throughout the Trump administration. And if you wanted to try and pinpoint it, you'd probably say April, which also happens to be the date in which he promised to liberate the economy. That is weakening, and many of us are very worried. You might say we're one bad step away from a recession. Separately, there's what's happening to prices, the nominal economy. And so we have seen here, I want to be a little careful about the prices because there's lots of different prices to talk about. We have seen a little bit of tariffs feed through to consumer price inflation. Things like furniture, which we all buy from China unless you're fancy and rich. I don't know. What are you like? Are you like a mid-century modern guy, Fergus, or are you an IKEA fella?
You know what? I can do both, but I am ashamed to say I do quite like a mid-century modern. My mum's always berating me for it. She remembers it being terrible when she was growing up.
Oh, but there's a certain beauty to it, isn't there? But that's not made in China. So you've been inflation proof. For those of us who are trying to quickly furnish a kid's bedroom, we go to Wayfair, or I'm not sure what the British equivalent is, and all of that's made in China. Those prices have been going up. So we're starting to see a little bit come through. There's another index called the import price index, which is the price foreign countries sell stuff to the US at. If foreign countries were to wear the cost of the tariffs, the way that would happen is in order to maintain market share, they would have to cut their prices to offset the fact that Americans have to pay tariffs. That has not happened at all. And so that says that the cost of tariffs is being borne entirely in the United States. So what we know, therefore, is that the input prices to American businesses have risen a lot. The prices they get to charge haven't changed very much. Therefore, American businesses are wearing most of the cost of the tariffs. What we anticipate happening over the next few months, and depends on the Supreme Court and a whole bunch of other things, and there's lots of complications always, is companies, if they start to understand tariffs as being permanent, a permanent rise in their costs, then they'll adjust their prices to keep up, which means the burden will go from American companies with smaller profits to American consumers whose paychecks will go less far. Part of that process is we might see the importer raise its prices for intermediate goods that then a manufacturer uses to make the thing you buy. Those are wholesale prices. That's what we saw today. And so today we saw last month's terribly bad news was offset by moderately good news. So that hasn't gone haywire yet. Watch this space.
Well, you did sort of tease it there slightly when you said that some people are waiting to see what's happening with the tariffs. And obviously, we spoke a week ago, and has now been confirmed that the Supreme Court will be reviewing the case around tariffs in what will be a highly accelerated timeline. It will hear arguments in November, and then I think we said that we might get a judgment by the end of the year.
There's a chance.
There's a chance.
There's a chance we get one in 2025.
Now, a quick look at the prediction markets, and these are predictions. This is on Polymarket. At time of recording, it actually thinks it's more likely the court will rule against the president by 54 to 46%.
And so let's just round that and call it a coin flip. I think that's right. And so I actually, in an earlier life, you may not know this, I began my career as a prediction markets expert. I'm one of the people who said this is what we should be looking at to track issues like this. And the reason is, before prediction markets, I had to call my friend who was a nerdy trade lawyer. Actually, I just checked that in with him before we spoke right now, and he said 50-50. What prediction markets allow us to do is all the nerdy friends, all the trade lawyers are hopefully betting against each other. And so hopefully this reflects the consensus view of not you and I expect we'll both admit to being terrible lawyers, but good trade economists betting real money against each other. So it's a 50-50 bet. The whole thing will be ruled unconstitutional. When I say whole thing, I mean the country-specific tariffs, not the industry-specific tariffs. And the Supreme Court took it on an accelerated schedule, which means that by the end of 2025, it's possible that we will finally know the legality of the tariff program that Trump first announced his excitement about not long after riding down the golden escalator 10 years ago. And in a sane world and a coherent world, one would check out the legality of one's policies before upsetting global markets and international relations, but one has chosen not to do that. The thing is, there are takebacks in one respect, which is it's also possible, it's not certain, if the court rules the tariffs illegal, that in fact it'll force the US government to pay them all back. But you know what there's not takebacks for? The tremendous rise in uncertainty, the investments that have been delayed, the relationships, for instance, with Canada, with Hyundai, with trading partners around the world that have been destroyed. And so it's quite possible the Supreme Court will rule the tariffs unconstitutional at the same time the NBER rules that they caused a recession. And if that feels like a deep and bitter irony, brother, I'm living over here, and it would piss me off.
And until we get to that point, whenever that judgment comes, is the US economy in limbo? And I kind of mean in terms of people waiting to see what's happening before necessarily buying goods or hiring. I know this week that the US added 911,000 fewer jobs than first estimated for the year to March 2025. Yeah, is there a kind of sense that until we get that judgment, nobody knows what's happening? We're in a bit of a limbo.
Let's put aside the benchmark revision. If you want to talk about that, we'll take that on seriously and separately. Is the US economy in limbo? Yes. I'm going to give you a very personal example. I may have given you this before. I live in the Midwest. You have to drive everywhere. Betsy and I, my partner and I, have one car but two children, and that doesn't work very well. We're thinking about buying a second car. Well, right now, there are very high tariffs on a lot of countries. Actually, cars are a bad example because they're going to be hit by the industry-specific tariffs. But think about any other major investment you might make. If your washing machine is on the fritz, if your refrigerator is not working well, should you buy right now, or should you wait until it's 15% on Europe at the moment? 15% on Europe. If you're thinking about stocking up on anything Brazil makes, much higher rates. If you're thinking about buying anything from India, it's a 50% tariff. Or wait until the Supreme Court are going to give you an end-of-season discount. And what a wonderful Christmas present that would be. So the thing is, a consumer always has the choice, not just between whether to buy something or not, but whether to buy it today versus tomorrow. And what this has done is it's created a very strong incentive to buy tomorrow rather than today. And when I talked about the consumers there, I really shouldn't talk about consumers, because businesses are incredibly sophisticated, and they filled their stock rooms just before the tariffs came in. And they'll probably let those stock rooms run down to zero when they realize that there are a 50-50 chance to get a discount in a few months' time. One thing that's really important to understand is that's going to create immense distortions in the data. People are going to push their spending from now to the future. And so that might make now look unusually weak. It might make the future look unusually strong. And then the month after that, we will have gone from unusually strong back to normal. And so that will actually look like a shrinking economy. And so it's going to be even harder to read our economic tea leaves. And so far, remember we talked about the distinction between the real economy and prices. So should I change my prices right now? Geez, I don't know. Just a few months until we find out what's going on. I'd really upset my customers. So I saw a recent survey come out of the Dallas Fed in which people said one of the most important reasons they hadn't passed on tariffs to price rises is they weren't yet sure that the tariffs were here to stay.
Yeah. And in terms of that jobs data, what relevance does that have to tariffs? Because I know even in the UK, I think we've got much worse job data than many predicted. The job market isn't great either side of the pond.
I'm sorry to my British friends, and if we caused it, I'm doubly sorry. But actually, I'm sorry either way because everyone deserves a job, dignity, a chance to put food on the table. Um, I think the jobs. So there are two conversations around jobs data. One, what is it telling us about the state of the economy right now? And the answer to that is it's slowed remarkably over the past 4 months. If you want to blame tariffs, the timing fits perfectly. If you want to blame other elements of our current madness, uncertainty, a move towards state capitalism rather than market capitalism, crony capitalism, a crisis of confidence in the competence of the administration. There are many things that have happened since April. But and one more that's very, very important to understand is a reduction in population growth due to cutbacks in immigration. And that one actually really changes the nature of the labour market. So there's a lot going on, and it does appear to have put us one bad shock away from a recession. Separately, there's another story going around about I have been an economist many, many years, Fergus. You can probably tell by the fact that I now have hair that grows on my ears. That's how old I am. And every year there's something called the preliminary benchmark revision, and no one on earth cares except nerds. Like you have to have 4-inch thick glasses to care about this. I do, and I follow it every year, and I love it. I love a good preliminary benchmark revision. And this year we've had the White House and congressional Republicans talking about a preliminary benchmark revision. Now, I'm happy to tell your audience what that is, but why don't we save that? I know in the car map they have stories to help put you to sleep. So maybe you and I could do one of those one day for the folks there who can't sleep. But basically, you've got a lot of bad faith people pretending to care about what is a normal part of statistical business. It's very hard to measure the size of the US labor market. There was recently a revision that was large but not unreasonable and within historical bounds. But the Trump administration wants to use any ammunition they can to attack the BLS. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is who produces all our employment statistics. And this is basically, if you receive bad economic numbers, you have two choices. One is fix the economy. The other is deny the numbers. And they're trying the second. It's infuriating. It's actually a really important economic story. It's profoundly in the statistical weeds. But there's not a lot going on here.
Justin Wolfers, thank you so much, as always, for joining us on the Trump Report today.
A great pleasure, mate.